Good afternoon. Welcome, everyone. Hopefully you all had a very nice lunch and won't be too sleepy. Let me start off just by thanking the organizers, BioPlus and INTERPHEX, for helping to organize this event. It's my first time being back here in person in almost 3 years now. So I'm thrilled to be here. We were last here in person, I think it was November 2019. So it's terrific to see everyone in the room together and to have this opportunity together. We're going to be speaking today about the path to commercialization, partnering, and partnering strategies to unlock value in your company. Before I do that briefly, let me just introduce myself and my law firm. My name is Joshua Hofheimer. I'm with Sidley Austin. We are a global law firm with more than 2,000 attorneys and 6 offices in the Asia Pacific region. And I'm joined here today by a few of my colleagues, Sharon Lee, who you might have heard speak earlier on intellectual property and trade secrets, and then Scott Kaplan, who's speaking tomorrow, former FDA practitioner, or sort of FDA officer, and speaking about FDA regulatory and compliance matters. But this session is going to focus on commercialization and the commercialization strategies. And what I call this is, I'm going to skip that slide for a second. What I call this is how to avoid the bear hug and maintain your independence. Because as a small company or as an emerging company, your goal is to strike the kind of deal that can unlock value for you as a firm, as an organization, but without hamstringing you or without making it so that you have been effectively acquired by that partner without them actually paying for the acquisition. Because you do have to do this deal and maintain your independence. I mean, that is a primary concern, is to be able to do the right transaction, structure it the right way, and then maintain your independence as a going concern so that you can continue to unlock future value. Now, I'm going to give you a brief overview of this. We'll talk about several principles, but then more importantly, I'm going to be joined on the stage by 3 colleagues and professionals in the Korean life sciences community, and we'll have a conversation about these topics, and they'll introduce themselves. So 9 principles. We'll move through these fairly quickly, but 9 basic principles. And the first one, of course, that you have to address when you're looking at partnerships is, why are we doing this deal? You need to understand internally with your team, with your leadership team, and with your board of directors, why are you doing this transaction? Is it simply for access to capital? Is it for some third-party validation? Are you trying to accelerate the development of a platform technology or of a particular product? Or do you need help accessing markets and expertise and talent that you don't have within your own organization? But getting a clear and unified understanding of why you're doing that deal internally is critical to being able to execute on that effectively. So map it out at the outset. And then once you understand sort of your principal goals, you have to consider what's the best partnering arrangement. You know, there are lots of ways to structure an out-license or a partnering agreement. You know, and it can be based on sort of timing and when you're going to partner your compound, your therapeutic, whether it's early stage or phase 1 or later. There's partnerships around a single product or compound. There's platform partnerships that provide development funding for a period of time with an access or an option to access kind of everything that's created in that window. And then there are also things like option deals where you have an option, maybe somebody takes one product with an option on success on subsequent products, or they option at various gates of development. And then of course, global versus regional partnerships and indication or field-specific partnerships can be some of the other pieces of this. Those are some of the different shapes and sizes, but where it fits, so you understand what we're talking about, I'm going back to this slide. Where these things fit, this is a graph that kind of gives you an understanding of, there we go. From the perspective of how we're organizing, these are the different types of arrangements that you can be doing or thinking about when you're partnering. And the way this slide works is, this is an increasing amount of integration with your counterparty, and this is an increasing amount of influence that your counterparty may have over your company or over your product. And obviously the MOU, the Memorandum of Understanding, is the most basic. That's just to get to know each other and try to see what kind of relationship we might have. Very little influence, very little integration. The acquisition, of course, at the top right is the most integrated because you've been acquired. It's done. Where partnering arrangements that we're talking about today, just so you understand, we're focusing primarily on the collaboration piece. And that's a contractual arrangement that may give your partner a fair amount of influence, at least with respect to that product, and perhaps with respect to your company. But it's not a fully integrated relationship. And these things you get more integrated with something like a JV, which some people may think of as a collaboration, but I'm thinking of it differently just for purposes of this talk, because a JV involves forming a new entity that the parties are going to contribute equity, resources, cash, in-kind contributions, and the like. That's not really what this focus is today, just so you understand and orient yourself. Again, we're focused on the contractual, collaborations. So then this is one of the key slides, I think, for thinking about how you make these arrangements and how you move forward with it. And it's the term sheet and what you're going to do in your term sheet. How do you want to use your term sheet? I think in some way, you've got to hit these 6 key principles in the term sheet. I would advise, I tend to advise my clients, I'm a fan personally of less detailed term sheets, unless there are certain pieces that you need to spell out early on. I think when you're dealing with cross-border collaborations and the like, you need to build the relationships and the trust at a business level, but I wouldn't dwell too closely on the language of a term sheet. I'd be looking to move more rapidly through that business stage and into the definitive agreements, but keeping in mind that these sort of 6 key principles are what you want to try to capture in one way or another in the term sheet. Obviously, the financials are important. You need those. If there's going to be any sort of restrictive covenants or exclusivity that you're going to try to impose upon your partner, because maybe they have more than one, mousetrap or more than one opportunity that they're looking at, you're going to want to address that in the term sheet. If there are specific due diligence items that you want to do, that you want to have or hold your partner to, you're going to want to address that in the term sheet. Obviously, intellectual property ownership and control is an important element. They can be done very succinctly, but you do want to hit these key topics to make sure you've got an alignment of understanding before you go into the definitive agreements. I just wouldn't dwell on the language now in the term sheet, because you're going to relitigate it, or you're going to renegotiate it when you get to the long form agreements anyway. So keep it simple, but hit these items. Streamlining governance. This is something that I'm not going to talk too much about now, but it's an important piece when you get into those relationships that are longer term, like sort of platform-based relationships where there's research and development funding. You have to have a pathway to sort of clearly and quickly understand, what's your escalation process going to be when you don't agree on something, how you hopefully get it resolved through your senior executives. But then if you still are at an impasse, that's where you do want to lay out carefully, what are the items that I control? What are the items that my partner controls? As far as final decision-making capability, what can't be done without mutual agreement? So where the status quo is maintained, and what might we be willing to consider having a third party resolve for us? That usually in an early stage collaboration is quite narrow, but it is something to think about. There may be certain things that you would defer to a third party. It's usually something that happens later around, pricing or something like that, or certain reversionary rights, but it is something to think about. Exclusivity. We talked about this briefly, but in these kinds of collaborations, exclusivity is an important principle to think about. But what it really means for you is doing the diligence on your partner and understanding what their goals are. Are you helping them to fill an unmet need? That you're filling a hole in their product portfolio that they don't have an answer for? Or is this a partner that is looking at what I call multiple mousetraps? They've got more than one therapeutic in development that's going after the same indication, or more than one combination therapy that's looking at the same indication. I mean, obviously, as people know, combinations with PD-1s are highly prevalent. Merck, I think, reported in their last quarterly report, something like 2,500 Keytruda clinical trials that, in different combination therapies. So people are looking at those, and you have to understand where you fit into your partner's product portfolio, because that's an important piece of understanding what kind of exclusivity you might be able to impose, what kind of leverage you might be able to impose to restrict them or keep them focused on your therapeutic, on your product. Because at the end of the day, if they're not going to go forward, you want to know that sooner rather than later. You want to you plan for success, but also plan to fail fast is my motto. Because if it's gonna fail, you want that failure to occur quickly so you can get the asset back. Because for the most part, I know Sharon, if you heard her speak earlier today, was talking about the importance of trade secret protection, which is very important. But a lot of this, especially with compound therapeutics, you're dealing with patent life. And that, as we know, is a declining balance. It's a ticking clock. And the quicker you get things back, if it's not going to succeed for whatever reason, just because a product is given back to you doesn't mean it's dead in the water. It could have been a safety signal that your partner wasn't satisfied with. It could have been, as we said, a competitive, portfolio issue. It could have been just a portfolio pruning decision by your partner. But it doesn't mean it's dead. But time is loss of value to you. So you need to try to think carefully about how you get something back quickly if it's not working, and how you incentivize the partner to make those decisions effectively and to move forward as quickly as possible. The due diligence is another key piece of this. Your typical pharma partner likes to say, okay, we'll use commercially reasonable efforts. And that's a very subjective term, and there's two standards of CRE anyway. But you have a lot that can be negotiated here. Universities obviously take one approach, as you're no doubt familiar, often putting timestamps or gates on things. That doesn't happen as much in private-to-private partnerships, but there can be some for things that are completely within the control of your licensee partner, like a decision to actually advance to phase 3 or a pivotal trial, or a decision to file for marketing approval. Those can be important. You also want to think about anti-shelving clauses in your CRE, and about perhaps triggers on acquisition, so that if there is an acquisition and your licensee buys a company that has a competing product, maybe you get the ability to terminate, or you get the ability to force them to make a decision with respect to which product they're going to continue taking forward. So the point of this is to remind you that just taking the licensee's position of, well, we will use commercially reasonable efforts to develop, that's your starting point in the due diligence conversation, but it doesn't have to be your end point. And there's more that can be done there. IP tricks and traps. I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time on this. It's a little bit dense in this. There's a lot to talk about here. But I think the key things that I've seen in some of my experience working with Korean companies of recent years is two. It's sort of, what is it? It's this area and this area. The first being the inbound. There's a challenge for licensees in Korea in dealing with, or for licensors in dealing with university funded or founded intellectual property. A lot of those agreements I've seen do not have the same sort of rigor that is applied to university agreements with private parties in the US or private parties in Europe. And when it comes time to out-license your intellectual property, that can become an issue that you have to resolve. It's like a due diligence item that you have to resolve. You have to bring greater clarity to those relationships. So that's something to think about. If you're an innovator, an entrepreneur that has based your technology on university-funded or university-created science that you've in-licensed, you may want to engage sooner rather than later with Sidley, but with a law firm to think about how we've documented that in a way that's going to be understandable. Getting legal English translations or the like in a way that's going to be understandable and defensible to the big pharma partner who we're going to partner with. Because if not, you're having to go back during the process and amend the university relationship, and you're at a little bit of a disadvantage from a leverage perspective. The other piece, when it comes to project IP and you have platform technology and the rights to the intellectual property that's built around and can improve the platform, especially with things like software, data sets, AI, and machine learning, that can be a complicated thicket that you have to think about with respect to who gets what IP in these relationships. It's obviously a little simpler with respect to like a single product out license, but it's not so when you're dealing with a platform. It's something to be mindful of and think carefully about with your patent attorneys and your business development team members. The commercial leadership, this one's an interesting one when it comes to not so much the top piece, but what you're starting to see more of, and I alluded to with the anti-PD-1 collaborations or the PD-1 combination therapies. We're actually, you're creating new paradigms when you're bringing combination therapies to market. And you as a company, you may have an opportunity to partner your combination therapy or partner your drug in combination with somebody else, with a PD-1 as an example, a checkpoint inhibitor. But there may be multiple combinations that you can create. And if you've ceded control of pricing, of the global pricing to that very first partner, you can put yourself into a significant disadvantage when it comes to the partnering arrangements for other combinations that you might create. And so that's something to be very mindful of when it comes to if you are a developer of a combination therapy and you are one piece of that combination. The final principle, and then I'm going to call up my colleagues, is just to think about what are the practical effects of termination. If you are getting it back, and for the thinking about the reason why you might get it back, there are results and residual rights that you may want to be seeking and that can be of value to you. Now, I don't want to take too much time, or I don't want to dig into the time of my colleagues who are going to join us, so I'm going to stop at this point. These slides are going to be available to people to download or access after this talk. And of course, come talk to me if you have questions and if you have opportunities you want to talk about. But with that, thank you all. And let me call up my other speakers, please. Okay, so can you all hear? Yeah. So we're going to have a brief conversation amongst us that hopefully will be a conversation. We've got about 30 minutes for this portion of the session. And we're going to try to reserve some time for questions from the audience because we've got a pretty good sized group of you in the room. So very happy to see that. And I'm looking forward to this conversation. But let me start so I don't do misjustice to your accomplishments. Let me ask each of you to introduce yourselves briefly to the audience.
Okay, starting from myself. Okay,
Yep.
So it's a great pleasure to meet all of you, and thank you, Josh, as well as Sidley, for giving me an opportunity to share some of my experience in doing business development work at various Korean companies, including some conglomerates. So I've started my business development career about 20 years ago. And I think I was lucky enough to ride on a wave where the Korean biotech industry was actually growing in parallel where I was trying to develop my career. So I had some interesting experiences with various types of cross-border deals. And right now, I'm EVP/head of R&D at Cha Biotech, where we're focused on developing cell and gene therapy products for eventual commercialization. Thank you.
So thank you so much for joining this session. This is Lauren Lee from Hanmi, and I have experience academic and global pharma of over 25 years now. And I joined Hanmi 10 years ago from started leadership in translational research in new drug development and global business development. And after that, now I'm charged in global R&D innovation now. So I'm going to talk about a little bit, focus on what's our kind of recent strategy to collaboration. We're trying to creative new models of business, not just the straight licensing or in or out. So we trying to develop our program or partners program quite quickly and bring to the patient quickly. So that's our goal. And I can tell you in detail later on. Thank you.
Hello, thank you for inviting me to this session. My name is Jungwon Woo, and I'm president at Genexine. I'm mainly in charge of Bio Research Institute and a lot of development divisions. Before joining Genexine about 9 years ago, my all experiences is in research institutes. So Genexine is the only and first company that I have, experiences built on in drug development. So Genexine has two platform technology called HiFC platform and also plasmid DNA vaccine platform. And we developed many innovative pipelines such as long-acting growth hormone, EPO or interleukin-7, and also HPV, cancer therapeutic vaccines. With these pipelines, we made quite of deals, various ones, and also plan to make more, and also finally to commercialize them soon. Thank you.
Thank you all. Let me start with you, Dr. Wu. If you could please share, an example of the kind of partnerships that Genexine has entered into. Genexine's entered into, whether it's been a global or regional, and the kind of partner you went after, the kind of platform or product, et cetera.
Yeah. So far, although the deal size was to me quite big, we made several important regional deals. So you, Josh, presented the several reasons, that can be applied to why we made those deals. So when I looked at it, the category that fits most to Genexine is like, we want partner to develop it together as quickly as possible. Because of having platform means that we have several pipelines. As a biotech company, starting biotech company, it was a little too many to handle for ourselves. So it was really helpful to have partners. So of course we share risks and also develop the timeline for the product faster. So interleukin-7, long-acting interleukin-7, GXI-7 would be a great example. So about 2017, we licensed out to biopharma located in China, although listed in NASDAQ. So, the collaboration we are doing together is they license in for their own territory. So they are developing on their own. So there are several, because of the broad applicability of the pipeline, they are doing their own clinical development. But also there are one important 160 patient clinical development in China that we are also together sponsoring. So there are, even with one product, one license out deal, there are different modes of collaboration. So that's, again, very helping us to develop the pipeline that we discovered and developed, hopefully as quickly as possible, and also sharing the risk. Risk means that financially and also timeline-wise.
Did you, with respect to the IMAB partnership, did you retain the rights outside of China?
Yes, we did, but also, because we have several different models, because one pipeline, we license out global rights for different indications. So I call it the pipeline that falls into the category is GXP1, which is for autoimmune disease. But for this GXI-7, we license to different regions. So we have other partner, KG Bio, which is actually joint venture, but but anyway, that joint venture is established with Kalbe Biopharma, which is the #1 pharmaceutical company in ASEAN world. So we license out to them. And the reason we were able to license out is that they do have a lot of immuno-oncology pipelines, and combination is the main strategy this is in IO. And GXI-7 can provide, without adding any safety issue, provide definitely the synergistic effect in the efficacy. So that's why with those portfolio of their pipeline, this product falls in well. So we license out to KG Bio for other territories markets, including ASEAN, South Asia, and Africa, and MENA. And for US and, so I think a lot of people you already know, the US and Europe, we license out to Neo-Immunotech, located in China, in US, but listed in COSDAQ a year ago. So these ways, we have many partners, but closely work together through joint meetings or discussions for the development. So try to go for one goal to commercialize this product and hopefully make it available for the patients as quickly as possible.
That does bring to mind the challenge, which I had mentioned in one of the slides on governance and control, because if you are having multiple partners
Yes.
for the same therapeutic, regulatory issues and governance and development and control issues can be quite a challenge. So
Yeah,
kudos to you for
challenge.
that.
Yes.
But let me move on and ask Kyung if you could share an example. And then Lauren, I'd like to have you talk about sort of the strategy shift that you all have undergone.
Okay, so so one thing that I could probably share today is it was a while ago, but it was a global deal with an MSD. It has been publicly known. It was a while ago, and the product was actually a biosimilar, but most advanced in terms of the development timeline. Back then, the product was in the Korean clinical stage, and we were looking for a partner for global commercialization. So the strength in the partner that we try to identify is the first late-stage clinical development and regulatory capability, as well as commercial footprint across the globe. So the type of the deal, the name of the agreement was actually a tech transfer and license, product license deal, coupled with a supply deal. In other words, although it was a tech transfer deal, we wanted to hold on to manufacturing and supply for obvious reasons, risk mitigation, obviously, right? But then global supply needed a huge capacity of manufacturing, which back then we were not intending to build by ourselves. So we sort of split the region in terms of which party will supply which region. And also another thing that we tried to, well, actually we were able to put in the contract was that we wanted to make sure that although it was a license deal, we wanted to make sure that we have a clear visibility in terms of what's going on within the big castle of Merck. So we had a seat in their internal development team. And through that channel, it was not like we hand over everything to the partner, but it was rather we sort of collaborate on a daily basis. In addition to the governance structure, such as joint steering committee or joint development committee. So it was a very good experience. And then I guess it sort of also put the not only the partnership, but also the internal team, R&D team within the company together for sort of, spiritually we're moving out of the, specific Korean market, but we're sort of, moving ahead.
Well, look, what you described there is a terrific example of sort of clearly understanding at the beginning what your goals are and structuring the right deal to help you all accomplish your goals as an organization, getting those principles right. And then the importance, which I didn't dwell as much on, but it's clearly relevant in making sure that you've got internal champions for your transaction within your partner's organization, because they will have constant turnover of their leadership. And having close and continual communication with them through presence on, steering committees, research committees, and the like, is really critical to keeping, your project in a sense top of mind, and to overcoming, the occasional not invented here mindset of some of the big biopharma partners. So, Lauren, if you could you hinted at it in the beginning, but if you could expand a little bit on the strategy shift that you all made in your partnering strategy, and why you did so, and what you've seen, as some of the, or you are hoping to see as some of the successes from that shift.
So thank you, Josh. So we have been collaborating many global farmers so far, and some of them was successful and some of them was not. So we learned that it's really partnership itself is not one time kind of relationship. It's a long term, and we have to we have a finish line until the patient have cured that indication of disease. So we trying to really like open minded and open the order, looking for the specialty in certain indication. So I have three example of the recent transaction. One is that with MSD Merck is with our dual agonist. So it was already kind of three of the common thing is that of the three transaction is that three program we already finished the phase 1 study, and we already confirmed the safety and tolerability in human, and we had some hint of the data of the human study that mode of action will work. And then that will give your partners of interest can develop our program much faster than what they planned. And then also the other thing is that they have a specialty of that indication. So for example, NSD, I don't have to tell about, but the other one is aptos, which they have a specialty in hematologic malignancies. And the third one is Alphamed. They have a specialty in ophthalmology and CNS disease area. So we cannot have the older specialty in the clinical study, but working together is a really kind of different field. And we don't limit ourselves as a global pharma. We are also looking for the very innovative bio ventures working together. And some ventures have very successful and developing our programs. And we have, we also the different the business model. One, the program like Merck, we also have our setting a commercialized bio plant, and also the supply engagement also, so that will give the partner more faster development of our program. So my point is that it's really if you're looking for your partner, you really can check partner is a really specialty in that your program, and then they can really have the develop together. That's most important thing to us. And then also the partnership and the understand each other is really important for us. Okay. Yes.
Would you rather partner with, that your partner have a deep understanding, have a robust program or a series of programs in the particular indication or disease that you're targeting, and may have multiple shots on goal, or in a sense, multiple programs targeting those diseases, versus a partner that doesn't have that in their portfolio, but wants to get into that, wants to add that to their portfolio?
That's quite, I think the later one is really challenging because they have to learn, and the clinical study is not that easy. So even if you know very well the disease physiological pathology, it's very difficult, the clinical endpoint and everything is very challenging. So we always looking for the partner who knows very well of the disease, understanding very well.
You're nodding your head, Kyung, to go along with that. So if you agree, which sounds like you do, what are you all trying to do to promote and to ensure that your product or your therapeutic is getting developed and having the right attention put to it compared to other competing products that same partner might have in their portfolio?
That's that's a very important point, and that's what actually, it's like it's our daily lives in terms of how we make sure that our product that we hand it over to someone else is actually being paid attention to as much as we would have wanted them to. So I guess there's multiple levels of, let's say, ways of doing it, I guess. But I don't think there's like 100 yes or no answer, but depending on the each company or the product, I guess there could be various tools. So, for example, from the contractual standpoint, again, we can put a lot of clauses in the agreement that they have to do commercially reasonable or commercial best effort, and we have to describe what they would be, but also at the same time, if possible, and if this can be negotiated out, make sure that you have a seat within their internal organization. I mean, what they talk during the joint development committee or joint development team meeting would be somewhat different depending on the situation versus what they would talk internally in terms of, what to prioritize, for this year or next year. And I mean, things change each year, and we cannot blame, any other partner if there is any change. But we want to be prepared. I guess that's what's more important. And getting prepared is, the timing is going to be very critical. So getting prepared in advance is something that our licensor has to always try to get equipped with. So getting some sort of an internal seat, if possible, and having that stated out in the contract could be very helpful. And also, aside from all these legal or structural things, personal interactions. It's not like we are making friends, but at least we want to make sure that we get to the level of relationship where, there's sometimes, we can talk in an open way, some of the difficult situations or unexpected or unforeseen situations which might happen later.
Thank you very much. I'm going to switch gears for just a moment and ask Dr. Wu, you've talked about a number of relationships that you all have and out-licensing relationships, which is very impressive. What do you think it is about Genexine that has made you an attractive partner to so many different organizations? What do you all bring to the table that others can learn from that's valuable in these relationships, these global and regional partnerships?
Yeah, I think firstly, we having platform really helped so that we can have not just one or two products, but several ones as a biotech company. So that can find many partners who might be interested in particular pipelines. And also we try to find out the partner who regard our pipeline as their top priority instead of just, oh, it's interesting, let's see what happens, So, and also we try to be also very flexible because all the pipelines developed from our own platform, the science and technology, our partner always needed the help from us. So we are always kind of driving seat in terms of providing all those science and tech data to them. But we also want them to develop very seriously with our pipeline. So yeah, so I think we try to accommodate their needs, and knowing that their willingness to develop it as serious as possible. Then in terms of the structure, what kind of collaboration ones they want and what kind of, the strategy they want, we are always there to listen to. So even the setting up the term sheet for the collaboration or the license out agreement, we try to be, sometimes it is a little kind of, difficult to make decision because we don't want to yield every time. But whenever it's a little tricky, we try to focus on what is the most important, what would be the most important value that we are seeking. Then we can be reasonably flexible. So, and then I think that builds up the trust and it kind of pays back for the stronger relationship. So instead of just one pipeline, they'll look into another one. So I think that's the flexibility and try to understand with each other was actually good a strategy to build a good network.
Thank you very much. I've got one or two closing questions for you all, but we have about 7.5 minutes left. So let me pause for a moment and see if anybody in our audience has any questions specifically for either of our panelists or for me. Well, I don't know why you would, but okay. See, this is the post-lunch coma. That's okay, because I have plenty of questions. So tell me, Lauren, Ms. Lee, what do you think some of the lessons, the valuable lessons that you all have learned as an organization, if you could share a little bit about that for, how you move these things, how you move most effectively forward in your collaboration strategy that this audience can take away with.
So actually, I have some many things to say about the long-term collaboration, but I think one of the successful collaboration was that with Genentech, we have been collaborated more than 5 years now, and then we really trying to working together from science to clinic. So it's not, once it moved to, even if that moved to the clinic already, we trying to always find a new mode of action and trying to find a combination strategy and also some other indication expansion. Through that, we kind of are very close communication of the two parties, and governance, as you talked before, is very clear. And then once we listen to each other, even if that with the close communication, we sometimes have a very clear strategy sorting out. So to do that, it's meeting very often, and the communication is very important. And I think although Genentech has a very strong science and clinical team, they also need some kind of our help also. So that was one of our very good experience. And then the other one is that you always looking for your partner and very creative way. There is no definite answer to it. So you question together and looking for the new the way to solve some problem. Partnering is always there's some problems and coming on, and you have to solve it. Otherwise, it's really difficult. So we trying to solve together. Yeah.
That must be one thing in some ways that's been a benefit of COVID, because I've certainly seen it. In some ways, it's shrunk the geographic or the physical barriers, because companies have been forced, whereas it might have seemed daunting to partner with Korea, a Korean company, a small company, when people were used to having meetings in person to work through issues. And COVID forced everybody to have to move to an online world and to Zoom. And it actually shrinks the distance and forced people to learn how to communicate effectively across the miles via video conference and the like. So in some ways, that's probably been a benefit to realizing for some of these partners that the lines of communication and access can be more open, notwithstanding the physical distance. Yeah. What about you, Kyung? Can you share with us any lessons learned?
Okay, well, I think Lauren pretty much laid out a lot of key points, and if I may add maybe a couple of
Well, tell
points.
me about a pivot then, something that you were doing that you had to pivot and realize this isn't working. We need something different.
Well, I
Without revealing confidence.
right. I mean, just if I may add in a couple of points to what Lauren had already described, is that, of course, communication is a very key, but always executing the communication is something which is challenging always, right? So, I mean, between the partnership, yes, between the partners is very important, but also to me, I feel like equally important would be the internal communication. In other words, expectation management internally about what the partnership is going to be like. And one way of managing that, I guess, would be that first of all, although you would have licensed out your product development to your partner, you always have to think of what potential contingencies I might have, in case something turns out in an unfavorable way down the road. So, and that requires a lot of, continued interest, in product development, as if you were to take it all the way down to the BLA filing. So it's not like somebody else's, it's your own product, right? But foster cared by someone else. So that kind of theory. And also, second, appointing an internal alliance manager for effective communication. I mean, internally, again, or as well as between the partners would be also another tool that we can implement in maintaining the partnership.
And that's actually a really good point. I mean, having that, the partnership doesn't end when the agreement's signed. It's really just begun. And having that alliance manager and actually making sure on both sides that the scientific teams on both sides understand, the rules of the road with respect to data sharing and confidential information sharing. And I don't mean that it's both what we should be sharing. People often focus on what they should not be sharing, but I think it's equally important to focus on what we should be sharing to enable success. And getting your alliance managers to get both your teams aligned on that at the outset is critical. And we've recently had a partnership that has devolved into active litigation because really the alliance management team did not get that straight from the beginning, and it led to significant distrust on both sides and distrust with respect to the science that ultimately doomed the partnership. So final words are with you, Dr. Wu, on any sort of lesson learned from the partnering arrangements.
Yeah, I think it was a short time, but I think communication, building trust is always very important. And when it's difficult, honesty is best policy. And also we try to share as much as we can. So that's always helpful. But the most important thing is always the product itself, the innovativity of the product, and also the global competitiveness. It will make this successful or not at the end.
So this has been great. Thank you all. I think you've helped everybody to understand that from the Korean life sciences perspective, the partnering and getting your products to be accessible to and getting access to the global stage is critical. But there's no single right way to do that. And you have to find the right package of ideas and methodologies that work best for your company and its goals. And you have to very much stay focused on, remembering that these relationships are long-term relationships and are going to require a significant amount of work to see them through and to see them become successful, which, is the goal for all of us. So with that, please join me in thanking our panelists. Oh, BG. Okay.
You made two big deals last year for Korean pharma companies. Do you see any special difficulties working with the Korean pharma companies compared to the global companies? Anything you can differentiate between the global pharma and the Korean pharma?
So I think that for the most part, both. I don't want to say it's been a problem working with the Korean life science partners, because it hasn't been in any way. They share many of the values and the attributes that you all have seen demonstrated on this stage. I think one of the areas that's a little bit challenging for some of the Korean companies as they think about, especially with respect to sort of combination therapies or platform technologies, the talent pool perhaps isn't quite as deep and the organizations don't have as much internal expertise with respect to certain regulatory matters or CMC type matters and quality controls that can influence how you structure those relationships. So I try to talk, and give advice to my clients in these deals to be thinking about these things and to put them in touch with some of my colleagues that can help them work through some of those issues. Because that's just one of the things to be mindful of, that you will have a role to play, and especially if you're dealing with something that's a combination therapy that is going to be priced independently. It's not going to be a fixed dose combination or in something that's in a single bag. That you have to think about what are those downstream implications. And I think that's one of the things that at least some of the Korean life sciences companies, they just don't have as broad a depth of experience as in some markets or as in some of the U.S. companies. But the science is just as strong, and the data is just as impressive for many of the companies, for any of these companies that we've dealt with here, which is why we are so committed and we're here in force. So, anything else? Okay, then we're done. Thank you.